Hello everyone, this is part 11 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The conquest of Kiri was an event that would be marked forever in the history of the shinobi nations. Yet it also marked the move of Konoha's rivals. In Kumo, increased activity along its southern borders, indicating their raising of defenses. In Iwa, the decrease of high-ranking missions, indicating that they were calling back all of their high-level ninja in preparation for an all-out war. In Suna, civil unrest was erupting throughout the entire village, which could quickly lead to downright pandemonium. However, one group was not so subtle in their movements. Barely 2 weeks after the news of Kiri's conquest spread, an army gathers to the west, and without any warning, launches a vicious assault on one of Konoha's western border guard bases. The border garrison is destroyed, letting this army enter freely into Konoha territory. I see. Naruto spoke as the scout finished delivering the report to him. It was around midnight. The doctors and nurses soon led him away to recuperate. Naruto turned to another of his Chunin messengers. Tell Anbu squads 5 and 8 that they are to go and investigate this army. What village are they from and who's leading them? Also bring me Morino Ibiki, Materashi Anko, Jiraiya of the Sannin, Maitogai and the Sound team. I want them in my office within the hour. The man bowed and immediately rushed off to complete his assigned duties. Naruto began mentally counting off the list of possible enemies. That area is accessible only to Iwa, and sooner if they cross the Ijuo River. Kusa and Am are also near that area, with Taki being just a bit further west. Kumo would have to cross through Iwa in order to get to that pass, so it is highly unlikely that they would attack from that direction. Snow would also have to pass through Iwa. So that only leaves Iwa and Suna that can gather an army the size of that man's report. With that thought in mind, Naruto left the hospital and began making his way to the tower. Sure enough, exactly 1 hour later Naruto found himself facing the Toad Hermit, the 2 top ninja in the torture and interrogation department, Konoha's Green Beast and the 5 Sound Ninja. The 8 ninja kept their silence, even Tayuya, who had sobered up considerably on the way there. Naruto leaned back in his seat as he pulled back his hood, revealing his blonde hair to everyone currently in the room. I will get right down to business. Yesterday at 3 a.m. one of our border garrisons was destroyed by an unknown army. Judging by the size of this force, and the difficult supply routes they need to secure, I would say they are possibly 1 week away at most. At this news the air in the room grew heavy with tension as they processed the implications of this news. Now, your assignments are simple. Ibiki, Anko. I realize that it has been some time since you have seen active duty, you more than Anko Ibiki. However, we are somewhat short-handed at the moment. Therefore, you 3 along with you 5, he said, gesturing to the Sound 5. Will lead our forces. Everyone was taken aback by that statement and looked at each other questioningly. Ibiki was the one to break the silence. But, Naruto-sama, isn't it the Hokage supposed to lead the army? And unless I am mistaken, last time I checked, you were the leader of the village, thus the Hokage. The scarred man stated calmly yet still somewhat incredulously. Naruto nodded. That is true, and I will be leading the army. However, the 8 of you will each be leading squads. I will lead you. Ibiki then looked to the Sound 5. Lord, no offense meant to the former Sound Ninja, but aren't there stronger, more experienced individuals that you could give the post as important as squad commander? Tayuya growled, rounding on the scarred man. You got something to say, you scar-faced piece of shit? She snarled. Jirabu and Kidomaru leaned in and began whispering to each other. What happened to the "I love you guys" thing? Kidomaru shrugged. I don't know. Before Tayuya could keep running her mouth off, Kimimaru broke in. Tayuya's silence. He cut in, stopping her tirade mid-sentence. He is right. Compared to many shinobi we are considerably weaker than them, even with our curse seals. Tayuya was about to go off again when Naruto held up his hand for silence. He then calmly passed his eyes over the people in front of him. While he is right, there are stronger individuals I can give the post to. You 5 will lead the squad for another reason entirely. Ibiki suddenly had a look of realization dawn on his face. I see, you wish to lower the tension between the Konoha ninja and the newly recruited ninja from Oto. Naruto nodded. Precisely, there is a clear division between the ranks, it is unacceptable, having 5 ninja from Oto assist in this upcoming battle will help to bridge that gap, and will prove fortuitous in the long run. Jiraiya spoke up next. So why am I here? He questioned as he straightened, crossing his arms for emphasis. Naruto locked gazes with the Toad Hermit. My attention will be on this strange army, you must contact your spy network and keep a close eye on all of the major villages, Kumo, Suna and Iwa. If the army we are facing turns out to be from one of those villages, then disregard spying on that particular village and instead focus on Kiri. I wish to make sure the situation there is stable. Regardless of who is leading the enemy, however, you are to send a message requesting a relief force to Kiri. Tell them they are to send men. Immediately. I also wish for you to keep up the search for your old teammate. Understood. Jiraiya nodded before he silently turned and jumped out the balcony. Naruto then turned back to his other subordinates. Now, gather your teams, we march to war soon. With a nod they each turned and walked out the room. Kumogakure, Raikage residence. The Yondaime Raikage could be found sitting in his vast library, reading over one of the many scrolls in his expansive collection. Around him, scrolls and books of all kinds numbered in the hundreds, perhaps even early thousands. Around the walls were also various weapons of all kinds, everything from nunchaku to naginata. Next to him, a young girl with pale blonde hair, possibly in her late teens or early 20s, was sitting next to him, reading over one of the scrolls as well. She sighed and looked at him with a mixture of pleading, annoyance and childish anger. Master, why do you have me do this every week? It is so boring. Zhuge Liang calmly continued to unroll the scroll in front of him as he traced over the kanji. One must be strong in both mind and body, Yugito. As my apprentice I believe I have taught you such. She sighed irritably. Yes, master, but for all you have taught me how to read, that isn't making it any easier to land a decent hit on you. As I said, Yugito, one must be strong in both mind and body. If you do not have both, then you will never defeat me, or replace me one day. Then with little preamble he stood, and the hour bell rang a second later. Now then, Yugito, your studies are over for today, I suggest you go and get ready, we will be having guests soon. Guests? She questioned with a raised eyebrow as she struggled to catch her breath. Guests from where? Just then a messenger walked in. My lord, the gate guards say that. Yes, I know, you may go, thank you. He interrupted, dismissing the confused messenger. Now Yugito, don't you need to get cleaned up? He asked in a tone which was calm but practically dripping with so much smugness that she could nearly feel the smirk on his lips. Yugito growled in annoyance. She had given up long ago on trying to discover how this man apparently knew everything before it even happened. That didn't mean she had to like it. Are you at least going to tell me who it is that's visiting? Just an old acquaintance, he replied simply as he sat down in his desk again and continued reading over his scroll. Cryptic bastard, she ground out through her teeth as she turned and walked out the door. Konohagakure, outskirts, 3:34 a.m. Naruto awoke to the sound of someone frantically knocking on his estate's main door. He slowly stood up and got dressed before he walked out. Finding his Anbu scouts. Report, he commanded. The head Anbu bowed his head before he spoke. My lord, the enemy army is calling themselves the Anti-Fire Coalition. They are formed through an alliance between the villages of Kusarame and Taki. They are led by the tree village leaders Kenpachi Zuroku, Yoshino Megumi, and Zaraki Kuetsu. Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger. Kenpachi Zuroku and Yoshino Megumi, you say? The Anbu nodded at his question. Kusa and Taki all had a fierce rivalry against each other for the central marshlands. If Kumo or Iwa got word that they had united to fight against him, contact Tabiki, Anko, Gai, and Kimimaro, Tayuya, Jirabu, Kidomaru, and Sakan, inform them that they are to have their teams ready by tomorrow at dusk. The 3 Anbu scouts bowed again. Yes, sir, they chorused before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto snarled as he closed the door. Yoshino. Kenpachi. They dared to stand against him. He was there when Kusa had been at war with Am and Taki. It was because of his assistance that Am and Taki were able to achieve their independence from the more powerful nation of Kusa, who had been close to seizing the western marshlands entirely, thus becoming the 6th great shinobi nation. And now those 2 Kenpachi Zuroku and Yoshino Megumi, he spat out the names with anger. You two have a debt to repay, I will now take payment for it, in full. He snarled as his eyes flashed red in the darkness and his braces glowed fiercely. Fire territory, war camp of the Kusa Amtaki coalition. Inside a rather spacious tent, a man wearing a modified Anbu uniform with a green dragon mask sat at the head of a decent-sized table, over which a map of Fire Country was sprawled over it. Wrapped tightly around his arm was a Kusa headband. Two more individuals entered. One was a rather large man. He was bald but had a well-groomed beard and mustache. He was at least 6 feet 7. Buddhist prayer beads were laced between the fingers of his right hand. He wore gold and black robes with the design of a tiger facing off against a dragon on his back, with the taki symbol between them. Next to him was a young girl. She was very petite, barely reaching 5 feet, with long black hair that reached just a little lower than her back and blue eyes. She wore a simple Junin uniform, only exception was the vest was cut a little shorter so it left her stomach exposed. Around her neck was the Am headband. The dragon-masked ninja nodded in greeting and the other two returned his nod as they sat down. Good, you're both here, now I believe we should, the dragon-masked shinobi began but was cut off by the young woman. If I may, Lord Zaraki, this was reckless. When we created this alliance it was under the agreement that we would each defend our borders from an outside invasion from Konoha. It was not for you to all but hand-drag us into a conflict by invading them. The larger man spoke. The dragon-masked Anbu snarled. If you two fools wish to roll over and let him plow through your lands first, then go ahead. I however won't stand for this upstart of a child telling me what to do in my own home. Nor will I see my land, the one closest to Konoha mind you, be damn near burned before your villages can act. You have done what I needed to, he said, standing up. And what's happened cannot be changed. We are on our course. You both know that otherwise you wouldn't be here. Now, seeing as you two are somewhat uncomfortable, let us postpone this meeting until tomorrow morning. That said, Zaraki exited the tent with an irritated air about him. Kenpachi sighed through his nostrils. That fool doesn't know what he's gotten us into. The young woman looked down to her lap. Lord Kenpachi, you do realize that this is betrayal, not only to Konoha who has been our ally for years, but to the Uzumaki child himself. Kenpachi nodded, fingering the prayer beads in his hand. He sighed before speaking. Yes, I know, however, he stood, his towering form looming over her smaller form. We have no choice, we must fight now. Konoha will not allow for a slaughtered garrison to go unanswered. Lord Zaraki is correct in his words, Lady Yoshino. The woman, Yoshino, nodded uneasily as she stood. Yes, I need to rest. I bid you good night, Lord Kenpachi. She bowed once before she walked out of the tent. Kenpachi fingered the prayer beads again. All right, Liang, what is this about? Came the voice of Yue Ying, wife of the god Raikage, as she entered his library where he still sat reading over yet another scroll. She swore he just did it to appear more educated than what he already was. He had probably read all the books in here 3 times each. You will see soon enough, my dear, he replied calmly, though she could practically feel the smirk on his lips. Juge Masong Liang. She growled his full name through her clenched teeth. She loved her husband to death, but the man could be so infuriating at times. I was in the middle of enjoying lunch with my students, who I have not seen for over 3 months, when your messenger arrived. Now, dear husband, I want an explanation. He held his hand up, and then began counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He looked at her, a sly smirk tugging at his lips as he spoke one simple word. Duck. Her instincts kicked in and she did just that, barely avoiding one of the Kumo Chunins as the man was quite literally thrown through the wall behind her, where he landed at the foot of Liang's desk. I told you I'll see him now. Came a pissed-off female voice from the hall. One which both Ying and Liang recognized with ease. Liang cleared his throat and rolled up the scroll, setting it aside. I would welcome you into my home, but I believe you have more than adequately done so yourself already. Isn't that right, Sunid of the Sanin? As the dust settled, it revealed none other than the legendary medic as she stepped into the newly made door, 2 other women following shortly behind her. Liang allowed his eyes to travel to Shizun, and then they finally settled on Akina. Only his wife noticed the slow, dangerous smirk that crossed his features. Fire Country territory, Leaf War encampment. Naruto sat at the head of a rectangular table. Ibiki was sitting to his right, with 8 other empty seats along the length of it. To Ibiki, the silence was heavy. It wasn't because he was frightened of Naruto, well, much anyway, but because he could tell the boy was very, very angry. More so than any other time he had seen him. So, being the interrogator, Ibiki decided to do what he did best, interrogate. Naruto-sama. He paused as he watched Naruto turn towards him. You seem agitated. And even if I am Ibiki, what in the world would make you believe I would share the reasons for my agitation with you? Ibiki paused. That was blunt, evasive. Whatever was bothering him was not just professional, it was personal. Because I am the only one who has bothered to ask. Naruto conceded that point. Ibiki watched him for any kind of reaction, a twitch of a finger, flashing eyes, growls, anything. But nothing came from him. Naruto, however, allowed his mind to wander. He remembered, back on the marshes of the Morocco plains, it would be 4 years ago in 3 weeks since that time. Oh yes, he remembered that day well. The day of his very first battle. It was cold. He could hear the sounds of battle ahead as his men, a contingent of 30 Anbu, followed silently behind him, the mask shining in the dim light that broke through the grey clouds overhead as they let the rain fall heavily on them. He could see the battle taking place long before any of the others. The sickly green waters of the marsh sloshing at their feet as the thin fog settled around them, the rotting trees and groaning wood, providing little cover from the shuriken and kunai being thrown by both sides as they clashed. The blood mixed freely with the water at their feet, turning it into a brownish quagmire instead. He could see several of the Am and Taki ninja beginning to flee, believing the battle to be lost. However, 2 remained, only 2. They stood amidst the center of the chaos. The first was a large man, wielding an even larger Naginata pole arm. The second was a young woman, possibly no older than 17, wielding 2 chain whips. The older man swung his weapon in a wide arc, sending a wind blade into the crowd, and then blocked the strikes from those near him. The girl behind him was twirling the chains in her hands, the bare edges of it slitting throats and slashing arteries with pinpoint precision. Soon, however, they were pushed back against each other, back to back as the Kusa-nin circled them. The larger man looked over his shoulder at her. Yoshino Dono. He spoke calmly. This battle is lost, make your escape. I will hold them here. The younger woman snorted as she smiled in resignation. It is no use, Kenpachi-sama. We're surrounded. She spoke simply. However, the sound of breaking wood, before a tree branch fell, brought their attention upwards, to the sight of a masked Konoha Anbu. Ninja of Taki and Am, Konoha, at your service. As the words were spoken, Konoha ninja seemed to appear from the mist all around them, leaping through the humid air as kunai and shuriken rained down on the Kusa ninja from every direction. The confusion and chaos escalated, men died and screamed. It was quick but none the less brutal. The Kusa ninja, which had numbered about 200, left, their numbers barely reaching 70. It was only a few moments later that Naruto was approached as he wiped his sword clean from the blood. The young woman with black hair approached him first, bowing and smiling gratefully. You saved us, you have my gratitude. Your gratitude is unnecessary, was his drawl as he sheathed his sword with a swift firm snap. It was my mission to assist you and I shall do so. A large hand rested itself on his shoulder and he looked up, not surprised to find the large bearded man standing there with a smirk on his features. Come, you and all of your ninja are invited to our celebration tonight. Naruto listened as some of his more inexperienced Anbu cheered along with the Am and Kusa-nins, while others, more experienced, kept their countenance, but the slight uplifting of their shoulders told him that they too were happy about this. He nodded slowly and followed the ninja back to their camp. That evening, as promised, the Am-Taki Alliance held a banquet to honor them and his Konoha ninja for having saved their lives. It was a setting few would ever look upon, ninja from 3 different villages, sitting down, eating and drinking together. Naruto, Yoshino and Kenpachi had a separate table a bit further away from the rest of the crowd. Kenpachi patted Naruto's shoulder amiably. We would have died without your help, my friend. Again I thank you. Naruto nodded, and soon their food arrived with the drinks. Naruto unclasped his mask, revealing his face to the 2 ninja, revealing his age. They'd suspected, his body being the first thing to have alerted them. But to see the truth of his age with their own eyes sent them into a brief silence nevertheless. Eventually it was Yoshino who began the conversation again. So, Naruto was it. At his nod she smiled and continued. You look so young, how old are you exactly? I will be 10 in 4 months and 3 days. He replied evenly as he parted his chopsticks with a crack. If Kenpachi or Yoshino were surprised by this, they hid it well. They both knew that Konoha had strong ninja, but to have a boy at the age of 9 already leading his own division of Anbu was practically unheard of. They exchanged a few more pleasantries, asking him about Konoha, where he in turn asked them about Amantaki. They didn't discuss the war, however, for now, at this moment, it was a momentary time of peace, a place to escape the bloody fate that awaited them the next day, and perhaps, Naruto unconsciously understood that. The calm yet jovial atmosphere was broken by the sound of music. The three leaders looked back to where the rest of the ninja and kunoichi were seated and found many of them beginning to stand and dance together to the music. Whether they were leaves, rain or waterfall ninja didn't matter, it was truly a fascinating sight. Yoshino smiled and looked over to Naruto before she stood, walked around the table and grasped his hand, startling the young boy. Dance with me, was her simple sentence. He looked to Kenpachi, but the man only smiled and laughed jovially. Flashback end. Naruto was brought out from his musings as the rest of his commanders entered the open roof tent they were in. Ibiki looked to them but then heard a soft whisper escape the blonde's lips. They betrayed me. It was so low he probably didn't even realize he said it out loud, but Ibiki had to keep his jaw from dropping in surprise. Before he could dwell on it, the others sat down and Naruto spoke. I see you're all here. He straightened his posture. I believe that I have a strategy that will work. He began but was cut off by Guy. Yosh, our youthful leader has ALLREADY come up with a brilliant strategy to defeat our opponents. Tell US Naruto-sama. What is your magnificent strategy? Share with US the BRILIANCE that is. He was promptly cut off as Tayuya's flute sailed through the air, nailing him on his right temple with enough force to send him toppling over in a daze. For the love of God, just shut up, you monster EYEBROWED fuck. She screeched as Guy continued to have swirly eyes, laying on the ground with a rather large bump on his head. Naruto blinked. If you are quite finished, he said, gesturing for her to sit back down. She did so, with Guy appearing in his seat seemingly unharmed and much more calm than usual. Now my plan is simple. You 5. He gestured to the 5 sound ninja. Along with myself and the relief force that will arrive from Kiri tomorrow will lead the main unit to meet this coalition. What about us? Anko said, grinning. What kind of blood-spilling job you got lined up for me, huh? You 3 and your respective squads. He gestured to Ibiki, Guy and Anko. We'll be having a much more. He paused for a moment. Deceiving role. Zhuge stood, grabbing a large, white feathered fan from its place on the wall. It had a gold handle, and the feathers were nearly 2 feet long. Where or how he had gotten them no one really knew. Tsunade stepped forward, he smirked in her direction, a smirk that was not lost on her. It read, just watch. He walked past her, catching both Shizune and Akina off guard as he stood in front of the blonde girl. She looked up into his eyes, pale blue meeting, blank pools of obsidian, never noticing the hand seals he formed behind his feathered fan until Gogyokane. He yelled suddenly. The blonde girl tried to jump back, but before she even made it 2 inches off the ground, his hand slammed into her stomach, 5 small flames sinking into her flesh, destroying the 5-element seal placed on her by Jiraiya. She gasped in shock, and with a brief flare of chakra she collapsed, clutching her stomach and breathing heavily. What? Sleep? She heard his calm voice, before she felt her eyelids go heavy and she fell forward. He uncaught her before she fell. What did you? Shizune too began but was interrupted by the Raikage as he addressed his wife. Yue Ying, if you would please take the young lady to one of the spare rooms to rest. He drawled. She growled and stalked over, hefting the girl onto her shoulder. Kicking him in the shin with enough force to make him grunt, sending a message which clearly read, if you don't give me an explanation as soon as this is over, you are so sleeping on the couch for the next month. Before stalking out the door, he cleared his throat, hiding his slight discomfort. An angry wife was not something he wanted to deal with. Ever. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. Shizune, go with her. The black-haired assistant jumped slightly, but quickly nodded as she turned and followed at a brisk pace. Linag turned back and settled his eyes on Tsunade. The two had met some time ago. While he was still a genin and she had just achieved her Junin rank, along with her two other teammates, Jiraiya and Orochimaru. His team had been caught in a border skirmish along the pass which connected Konoha and Iwa, and she and her team had arrived in time to help them. Years later, when he had achieved the title of Raikage, they had met again. This time, when his scouts had found Jiraiya's half-dead body floating in the river. When asked what happened, he only said one thing, Orochimaru. It didn't take long for him to decipher what had happened. Orochimaru had betrayed the village, since he highly doubted that anything short of 20 Anbu platoons could take down two of the legendary Sannin while fighting alongside one another. He had sent word to Konoha, telling them that Jiraiya was in Kumo and Tsunade was the first to arrive. It is rumored that she ran 2 days straight without pause, and arrived in Kumo at the dawn of the third day, healing his injuries and stabilizing his condition, before collapsing from chakra exhaustion. He had visited them during the brief stay here, hoping to finally seal a peace agreement with the Leaf Village, and had finally achieved 1 year later, with them acting as envoys. Only to have the alliance fall and break apart because many of his former high-ranking retainers wished for the Hyuga eyes. It was at that moment that he swore to never allow himself to be caught off guard by anyone again. And he had succeeded, pouring himself into the studies of strategy, psychology, diplomacy, politics and even astrology, and was now regarded as one of the most intelligent and powerful ninja Kumo had ever produced. Some, more avid supporters of his, claimed that he could even predict the future through the use of magic. Utter nonsense, of course. He did predict the future, though hardly by magic, but instead by education. He analyzed the situation and prepared for every single viable outcome as much as he could. Then, judging by the personalities and behavioral patterns of the individuals involved, made his predictions. When an answer eluded him, that was when he turned to the stars, though that was very rare and its effectiveness or lack thereof to date had not yet been proven. It was still something to think over. Juge, Tsunade greeted seriously. He bowed his head, the small smirk tugging at his lips again. Tsunade, he greeted back before gesturing to one of the seats in front of his desk. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss. She nodded, and sat down. As he walked over and also sat down, setting his feathered fan down on the desk, he calmly began drinking his tea. Now, you may ask what you wish. She leaned back on her chair, already having known his elusive mind games as he practiced with both her and Jiraiya when they were messengers between Kumo and Konoha. First off, how did you know about Akina's condition? He reached into one of the desk drawers and pulled out a small file. Placing it on the desk and sliding it over to her, where she carefully took it and began to examine it. You should know that your sensei could never hide something from me forever, Tsunade. He stated before sipping his tea again. Though I do admit, even I had almost missed this. In fact, if it wasn't for that civil war young Naruto caused, I may have never even found out. He heard her sharp intake of breath. But this says that she's his sister. He interrupted, finishing his tea as he set the cup down. Even I was somewhat surprised by that. But it was not all that unbelievable. I have to tell, she began, but was again cut off by the Raikage. You will do nothing. His voice was soft, but held a firmness to it which made Tsunade pause. He leaned forward, staring her straight in the eye. We do not tell her, not yet. She will find out soon enough on her own. Still, this news, if she finds out on her own, it could prove very damaging. Juge. Naruto killed the people to believe to be her parents, finding out not only that her parents were never really her parents to begin with, but also finding out that she's the sister of the man who murdered him is not a blow I would deal anyone. He nodded. You're right, however, she has had much to deal with. For now, we will simply inform her of her status as a Jinchuriki. Tsunade nodded, slowly, though it was a bit hesitant before she looked at him. So tell me, what will you do about Naruto? You obviously have a plan. Juge nodded. Yes, I do. It all depends on Naruto's next course of action, however. He stood. Now Tsunade-sama, I suggest you go rest, you have no doubt had a long journey. She nodded, stood and bowed. Before she fully exited the room, another messenger entered, ran up to the Raikage and whispered in his ear. Juge's eyes widened slightly, the only thing that betrayed his shock. I see. Thank you. The messenger bowed before leaving. Juge walked over to his desk and gripped his feathered fan, before walking to the balcony. It appears my next course of action has been decided for me. he stated simply as he placed a small note on the foot of a hawk, before releasing it to the sky. 2 days later, Awaga Kuritsukikage residence. Good. All of our preparations have been made to march then. Yoshihiro Shimazu's gruff, but calm voice could be heard as he read over the list of provisions, medical equipment and supplies Iwa had gathered in preparation for their campaign against Konoha. Yes, uncle, Toyohisa replied as he bowed his head. Yoshihiro let a smirk grace his features, one that was anticipating the battle to come. All right, let's get ready then. In 4 days' time, we'll march on to Konoha. His declaration was met with cheers from the ninja as each were eager to avenge their loss at the hands of Konoha's accursed Yondaime. However, their cheers were brought to an abrupt end as a Chunin scout barreled into the door. My lord, he yelled before he fell to his hands and knees at Yoshihiro's feet, breathing heavily as he struggled to catch his breath. Calm down, boy, what is it? Kumo has attacked us, my lord. They're burning the villages headed straight for us. What's that? Came Toyohisa's outraged question as murmurs broke throughout the ninja. Yoshihiro, however, remained calm in the face of this, before he grinned and let out a bellowing laughter. So Zhuge, you seek to make this war a bit more interesting too, eh? He, I can't wait. Sleeping dragon, I can't wait. Naruto stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking Fire Country. In the far distance he could see the faint smoke. That's where the enemy was. Kenpachi, Yoshino, he thought as his eyes narrowed. You two seek to stand against me now. He unsheathed his blade, watching as the pale moonlight reflected off the edge. And thus, provide my first true obstacle in my path to conquest. However, I have come too far, to fall by the likes of you. I will win, you will not stop me, none of you can stop me. Kusarame Taki encampment. Yoshino stared at the night sky, a somber, almost pained expression on her face, as she gripped a butterfly pendant around her neck. Kenpachi stood behind her, an equally somber expression clouding his features. Naruto. The cool breeze of the crisp air ruffled the trees as the morning mist began to part. Naruto stood on one of the trees that overlooked the coalition encampment. They were 300 yards away more or less, but even from this distance he could tell that they were readying themselves to march again. He felt the branch shift beneath him and turned his head to catch sight of Guan and Ginchiko. The Kiri ninja's missing eye was patched up nicely, only the faint edges of the scar Shizune's senbon had caused could be seen. And Ginchiko also looked well despite her all too recent injuries. Naruto looked back to the camp. I assume your men have been briefed. The two Kiri Junin nodded before allowing their own gaze to travel to the camp just a stone's throw away. Guan moved to speak, but Ginchiko beat him to it, surprising him slightly. Lord, if we do not end this quickly, I fear Iwa, Kumo or Suna may take advantage and strike us from the rear. Both Guan and Naruto noticed her slight hesitation in calling him Lord. To be expected, the Jinchuriki supposed. He nodded. Do not worry, I have already addressed the situation between Kumo and Iwa. It will hopefully keep them busy enough for us to finish this undisturbed. Both Guan and Ginchiko exchanged glances before the larger man decided to voice their thoughts. What do you mean, sir? A platoon of 30 Kumo Anbu leapt through the trees silently. Their forms mere blurs as they whipped past. The leader, a man wearing a bear mask with a green cloak, held up his hand, signaling them all to stop. This is far enough, he yelled before he leapt down to the forest floor, the others following closely behind. The leader reached for his mask and with a soft click, the strap was unbound and he slipped it off, revealing. Ah, my youthful comrades, we have arrived in fire territory again. Remove your face masks and let our victory be heard. Such was the cry of one Mito guy as he threw off his green cloak. The rest of the ninja removed the forged Kumo Anbu masks and headbands, revealing Konoha Junin and Chunin hidden beneath. One grunted as he removed his mask and cloak, tossing them aside as he fixed his headband. I gotta say, Hokage-sama's pretty smart, having us pit Kumo and Iwa against each other. Guy's expression didn't change as he thought. Already they acknowledge him as their Hokage. Still, even Guy had to admit the strategy was good. Have his squad pretend to be Kumo ninja, and attack Iwa, who had no doubt been planning to attack Konoha, thus putting their two greatest threats against one another, leaving him free to deal with this coalition. Guy-san. Another addressed him. Do you believe Abiki-san's and Anko-san's missions will proceed as planned? He smiled, giving the man his nice guy pose. Do not worry, my youthful comrade, our friends Ibiki and Anko will succeed. Before the man could say anything further, Guy turned on his heel. Now, my youthful comrades, onward, back to Konoha. A short pause. That's the direction of Kumo, isn't it? One ninja whispered to another. Yes, he answered back. Another short pause. How long do you think it'll take him to figure it out? It's Guy, how long do you think? Yet another short pause. Fuck. Meanwhile, Ibiki and Anko were also leaping from tree to tree, their two contingents, numbering 60 men in total, following closely. Ibiki looked to the purple-haired Kunoichi as he spoke. This is where we part ways, good luck, Anko. She grinned back at him. Ah, Ibiki-chan, you really do care. She sniffed a few fake tears as he grunted in irritation. She giggled after a moment. Don't worry, I don't need luck, I've got knives. He nodded before he made a few hand signs to the men behind him and with a strong leap, swerved to the right, vanishing into the forest along with his men. Anko smirked as she looked behind her to her own group of ninja. Alright boys, we gotta make good time so we can catch those grass idiots off guard. Pick it up. 2 days later, Naruto stood again at the top of a tree, the green leaves, shielding his form from the harsh sun and the eyes of the enemy who continued to approach. They were still just beyond his sights, just a few hundred yards. Kimimaro suddenly appeared next to him. The last Kaguya stared impassively at his leader. We are in position, Naruto-sama. At your command. Naruto nodded. I trust you know the plan. When I give the signal, pull back immediately. Kimimaro nodded. Yes, however, you have yet to tell us what the signal is, Naruto-sama. He replied impassively. Do not worry, Kimimaro, you will all know it when you see it. He replied somewhat cryptically before he looked to the former sound nin. Now, go, rejoin your squad and wait for the enemy. He bowed his head once before leaping to the tree tops. Naruto looked back to the general area he could feel the enemy approaching from. Kenpachi, Yoshino and Zaraki. The three of you have decided to shoulder a burden far too heavy for you to bear. I shall take that burden from you, together with your lives. Yoshino sighed to herself as she sped through the forest floor, the rest of the ninja army moving swiftly at her side. The coming confrontation was not something she wanted, and the more she ran it around in her head, the less she wanted it. Still, just as Lord Kenpachi said, they had to fight. As the leader of her village, she had no choice but to fight and defend her lands now, no matter how much it pained her to do so. Yoshino smiled as she gently traced the petals of a flower. She had found this field near their encampment shortly after they had placed it, and for the last month or so came here every night. It was beautiful and calming, reminding her much of Am's delicate flower gardens. The tropical nature of the country made it so that a variety of wildlife and plant life could thrive easily even within the city limits. She sighed, but the sound of footsteps caught her attention. She turned, gripping one of her chain whips instinctively before she caught sight of the familiar mask. She smiled, though she knew it would not be returned. Naruto-san, what are you doing here? You have been leaving the encampment often of late. I found bit prudent to follow. She hid a frown at that. She knew the reason why he had followed. He wanted to make sure that she wasn't leaking information to the enemy. While she was insulted by the insinuation, she also knew that not taking such precautions was foolish. She would let it slide. She made herself smile a bit more before she sat down and motioned for him to join her. He walked over, but didn't sit, merely standing by her side. I like this place. She spoke, whether it was to herself, or to him he didn't know, but he still felt compelled to ask. Why? She smiled and gestured to the field that lay before them. It's beautiful here, the troubles of the world don't reach this place. She took a deep breath as she paused. And even if it's for a moment, I can be at peace. HN, was his monosyllabic response as he knelt down, cradling one of the delicate flowers with his calloused hands. You find beauty in these. His tone was neutral as he spoke. Their beauty is fleeting, soon they will wither away into nothingness. She smiled kindly, pitying the poor boy that had been turned into this, but she wouldn't show it, she wouldn't dishonor him like that. Similar to our own lives, don't you think? He turned towards her then, the slitted eye holes of his face mask not allowing her to see the calm pits of ice as they stared into her own dark brown ones. She smiled again before looking up at the sky. Our lives, just like these flowers, are fleeting. Naruto-san, we're here today, but what of tomorrow? Will we still be here? No one knows, that's why we must cherish each special moment that brings us peace. He said nothing, instead turning his gaze to the sky. She smiled as she looked upon his form of crimson and black, smiling in something akin to fondness. Naruto-san, she thought. I know that somewhere you have a kind heart. They haven't succeeded in taking that from you, and hopefully they never will. They remained there, at peace. Flashback end. Beside her small form, Kenpachi watched as her form visibly sagged, as if a great weight was on her shoulders. He knew why. He too was not in any way looking forward to the conflict to come. He remembered that boy, and despite that they had met mainly on the field of battle or near one, his memories were nothing but amiable with the young man. Flashback. That wound you received yesterday has not yet healed. You should return to the camp. I will keep the enemy occupied here. Naruto spoke calmly to the larger man that stood beside him. Kenpachi smiled, but it came out more like a grimace as he rubbed his bandaged chest. I cannot allow you to do that, Naruto-san. You see, we must hold out until our reinforcements arrive, and though you are strong, my men do not know you. Seeing me here will raise morale and help them all fight better. If you do not rest, then it will not matter because you will die regardless. Then where will their morale be? Kenpachi sighed. The boy didn't understand. He placed his arm on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto-san, look at those men behind us. He spoke calmly, almost in a fatherly tone. Naruto did as asked and looked behind him to the 40 or so ninja that went about preparing themselves for the coming battle. Now please tell me, what do you see? Men preparing their equipment. He answered simply. I will tell you what I see. I see comrades with families waiting for them back home. People worth protecting. If it helps them return to their families, to their lives, I will gladly sacrifice my own. Remember that every comrade is precious and must be protected. He paused for a moment before he spoke again. When one is fighting to protect, not destroy, that is when one's true strength is revealed. Remember that, Naruto-san. And now they marched against him. It was distasteful to say the least. The leader of Taki was brought out of his thoughts as a loud crash and dust cloud appeared in front of them. There was a loud cry of ambush. Before 3 large snakes appeared from the cloud of dust and slammed into their forward ranks, and hundreds of kunai and shuriken rained down on them as Konoha ninja began leaping down from the thick tree canopy. Naruto knelt on the head of one of the summoned snakes, his feet sticking firmly to the creature's head with chakra. One of his swords was unsheathed, glinting in what little light cut through the trees above. The snake beneath him thrashed violently, lashing out with deadly poison and razor-sharp fangs, scales like black chainmail as they deflected kunai and shuriken all too easily. He leaned to the left, then to the right, avoiding 2 ninja that lunged at him and then catching the throat of the third one with a swipe of his sword. Blood rained around him, falling and loosing itself in the crimson cloak over his shoulders. His sensitive ears caught the whizzing sound of kunai slicing through the air. With a small gust of wind chakra he deflected them, the exploding tags going off in the air before they reached him, picking up dust and whipping the wind and heat across his face. With a leap he got off the snake's head, going through the flames and dust, charging headfirst into the enemy ranks, which had been reduced to a chaotic mass of people as Konoha ninja and kunai rained down over their heads. He wasted no time as he began cutting his enemies to pieces with swift and precise movements, aiming for vital arteries and organs as he sliced them open. He sidestepped one's attempt at a downward cut before he swiftly and effortlessly cut open his stomach before grabbing his face and shoving him to the floor. He blocked another strike aimed at his thigh and countered with an upward sweep of his blade, cutting off the man's leg at the hip. He took out a kunai and threw it, lodging the metallic projectile between the eyes of another who charged at him. He heard the sound of chains and turned on his heel, raising his forearm in time to block a kunai with a chain attachment. It wrapped around his arm and the man pulled hard. Naruto gripped the chain and sent a burst of wind chakra up the length of the chain, shredding it and the man's arm to pieces. He turned, blocking a kunai easily as he unsheathed his second blade. He could see the former sound ninja as they made their presence known. Arrows from Kidomaru killed ninja before they could scream. Jirabu's massive strength and arsenal of earth jutsu working together with Saken and his brother Akon. He could hear Tayuya's flute in the distance, the tune distinctive and distracting among the other sounds on this field. He looked to the right, and found another ninja approaching, but before he was able to dispatch him himself, a sword made from bone impaled the man, stopping him dead in his tracks. Naruto looked up to Kimimaro as the bone user passed overhead and nodded in his direction. Kimimaro nodded back, before calling his sword back and using his bone whip to lash out at others around him. He took a stance with his two blades held in a reverse grip, lashing out with a confusing flurry of moves, weaving and moving in and out of attacks as if he had rehearsed it, killing Ninja with each swing of his two blades. In the distance he noticed Ginchiko and Guan as the two cut a bloody swath across the field with Guan's massive strength and Ginchiko's swifter lightning strikes. He cut open another ninja's throat, unmindful of the blood that sprayed over him as he observed his retainers. His senses perked up as he felt a familiar presence, two familiar presences actually. He stopped, freezing mid-motion before he straightened and turned slowly, his blue irises glowing faintly beneath his hood as he finally rested them on the two he once called allies just as Yoshino's chain whips cut down a Konoha nin and Kenpachi dispatched another. The two stilled, sensing his gaze on them, they turned, finally coming face to face with the boy they hadn't seen in years. Even with the changes to his attire and physical body they knew it was him, his presence was unmistakable. The gazes held one another for a long time as the battlefield seemed to vanish from view. Both Yoshino and Kenpachi's eyes held a silent plea. Don't do this. However, something shocking and disturbing occurred just then. His shoulders shook, and with a start they realized he was laughing, the hollow sound of his voice sending chills down their spines that froze the marrow in their bones. They tensed ready to fight this boy that they had once called a comrade when suddenly, before anyone could react, another ninja appeared behind the blonde. They recognized him instantly: Zaraki, the leader of Kusa. Naruto turned his head to look back at his attacker, and Yoshino could have sworn she saw his eyes flash before Zaraki brought his blade down, small traces of lightning chakra surrounding the weapon, allowing it to burn and tear through flesh and bone as he carved a deep jagged wound down his back, from his right shoulder, all the way down to the left hip. Their eyes widened in momentary shock and horror as blood exploded like a shower from the garish wound and Yoshino could not stifle her gasp. The blade in Naruto's right hand dully clattered to the floor as he fell on his side, crimson blood pooling around him. Zaraki moved quickly, his blade ready to deliver the killing blow. However, a whip made from bone snatched the weapon from his hand. He turned, just in time to barely avoid Kimimaro as the bone user lunged at him. Yoshino and Kenpachi, after a moment of hesitation, moved to join the fight when Ginchiko appeared in front of them, Raiten, Denko no Heki. A small wall of lightning exploded from the ground between them, stopping the two in their tracks as she leapt back. She looked to Naruto in time to see Guan place his arm over his shoulder, ignoring the blood as it seeped into his green clothes, turning him a dark brown color. Seeing her commander in such a state, she cupped her hands over her mouth and called the order. Retreat! Retreat! She yelled, throwing a green smoke bomb down on the ground, alerting the Konoha nins that it was they who had been called to retreat. After a few moments of confusion, the Konoha ninja again took to the trees, retreating swiftly back to their own territory. Quickly! Reform the ranks, we must pursue him at once. Zaraki called to his men before turning to Yoshino and Kenpachi. You two as well, move quickly, now is our chance to end this upstart. We have to get after him right now. The dragon-masked ninja spoke. Zaraki-sama. Yoshino spoke calmly. This could all be a trap. We must proceed with caution, do not pursue the enemy so hastily. I'm not sure how many wars you've fought, Lady Yoshino, but I assure you that now that their leader has been injured and they stand without him and are demoralized, this is the greatest opportunity to rout them completely. Her eyes narrowed. I have fought plenty of wars, Lord Zaraki, and I also learned that rushing into a fight will more than likely lead to your own defeat rather than theirs. Fine then. The Kusa nin growled out. You two can stay here and plan, resting your frail bones while the rest of us secure our homes. With that he turned to assist in organizing his men to retake the pursuit as quickly as possible. Yoshino grit her teeth hard before she felt Kenpachi's calming hand on her shoulder. Kenpachi. I know, Lady Yoshino, he replied quietly before he too began moving to organize his men. Meanwhile the Konoha ninja rushed through the trees at breakneck speed, the sound 5, Ginchiko, Guan and the injured Naruto at the head. Guan heard a faint chuckle at his side, and with a slight start, the long-bearded man realized it was Naruto himself that was chuckling. Why are you laughing, Naruto-sama? He questioned, worried that the boy was delirious from blood loss already. Because Guan, they injured me, they believe they can win. It took a moment for the green-clad Kiri ninja to catch up with what he really meant. You knew the attack was coming. Of course I did, was his simple reply. Then why did you not dodge it? Simple, now that they believe they can win, they will pursue us, leaving their rear open. Guan was left speechless as he dumbly leapt through the trees. Then that means that those 3 squads you sent out earlier, he trailed off as Naruto nodded. Yes, one was to distract Kumo and Iwa, and the other 2 will attack the villages of Am and Kusa now that they're away. In their haste, they will not learn of it until it's far too late. They've done what? That was the voice of the resident Jinchuriki of Kumogakure, otherwise known as Yugito, as she addressed the Raikage, who calmly sipped more of his tea before he answered. Konoha has fooled Iwa into believing we attacked them. Yoshihiro is marching his men to our borders. What? We have to tell them what happened right now. She spoke as she moved to the door when his voice reached her. No, we will not. Excuse me, was her incredulous question as she rounded back to him. I said, we will not tell them anything, merely send orders to tighten the defenses around our borders. But sir, Yugito, he interrupted firmly yet gently. Come with me, he said as he stood from his desk and made his way to the balcony, the blonde girl following silently. He stood leaning one hand over the railing and waited for her to join him. When she finally did, he spoke. What you must learn, Yugito, is to see beyond the battlefield, to see the repercussions of your actions, rather than your actions themselves. Is that what you do? Seeing what lies beyond. He nodded slowly, his raven black tresses waving slightly in the cool breeze. Yes, see what lies beyond, Yugito. When you learn to do that, tell me what you see. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.